Hey guys, Duke here. Today I'm going to be doing something a little bit different than my usual gas mask reviews. Today we're going to be talking mostly about PTTs, specifically the U-94, how to identify between the airsoft and the legit ones, which for most people is probably a no-brainer, but I thought I'd go in depth with it because nobody's really kind of talked about it from most places I've seen, and just kind of go about the ins and outs of what my personal take is on the U-94. But before I get into that, I'd like to make a disclaimer and say that if it sounds like I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about, I probably don't. I'm not an electrician, nor am I a comms expert. My main niche is CBRN protective gear, so if there's any kit builders or gear queers watching this video, I would recommend taking everything I say with a grain of salt, and if there's any corrections, feel free to leave them below. That being said, let's get into it. So, little brief history on the U-94. It was originally developed sometime in the 80s as a for aviation purposes, and then US SOCOM eventually found out that, hey, these are pretty good for land-based comms as well once they've been rewired for the 6-pin embedder radios. So that's what they ended up doing, and it's pretty much become a ubiquitous golden standard for push-to-talks throughout the world. Now, there's several modernized variants that Television Equipment Associates, or TEA, makes, and also Slinks makes an upgraded copy as well. There's several modernizations of the U-94, but overall, what most people will end up going to is just the basic Nexus U-94 A/U push-to-talk. And getting into the differences between the airsoft repros, which I have over here, they're pretty easy to spot if you know what you're doing. Even if you really don't, it's kind of easy to tell, even from a beginner standpoint. So, getting into the initial impressions on what to look for, the biggest thing, obviously, is markings. As you can see, the legit Nexus ones are obviously stamped Nexus, U-94 A/U, M9177/5-U. And these will also have the part number of TJS 102, so if you want to find unissued stock ones for making your own modifications, which I will get into modifications in a moment, and I'll tell you why I'm deciding to make my own rather than buying from JCI Comms or Disco 32. But anyways, that's the main way to tell between an airsoft and a legit real steel U-94. A lot of the airsoft ones will have a fake MSA PRC sticker because a lot of the legit ones will be MSA branded, and this particular one has a repro sticker on it. Another good way to tell is the cord protector, because obviously they're going to be usually configured for Baofeng radios and that sort of thing, so they're going to have these very small, dinky cord protectors on them. Now, legit real steel ones, I mean, assuming that they're legit MSA ones, they will probably not have a cord protector this long. This is just what I've bought for my own conversion, and it works pretty well. I'll probably put a parts description, a parts list down in the description below for you guys to check out in case you were curious on what you what you needed to buy in order to make your own conversion. And then another thing is the connector for your Peltors or your Sordin. Honestly, any headset you want to plug into there. So it's a bit recessed into the casing itself, as you can see. It does stick out a little bit, but as you can see, it is mostly recessed in there. Whereas the legit real steel one will be a bit further stuck out. It's a lot more prominent than the airsoft replica ones, just the way the airsoft replica ones are designed. And another thing I noticed, this is also a pretty big difference, is the screws. The legit ones will have slotted screws, and then the airsoft replicas will have these Phillips head screws. But some of them that have been amplified by companies like which was it? It was Sky Eye Tactical, I believe it was. They usually use Torx screws, tamper-proof screws, to make their replicas. So that's another thing to keep in mind, is that a lot of the legit ones, or all of the legit ones, will have slotted screws, assuming that they haven't been upgraded or modified. So keep that in mind as well. And then the final thing that I really want to mention is the little buttons on top here. As you can see, the airsoft ones, the shell will be seamless with the button itself, because these just the airsoft ones will use a puny little micro switch inside of these. It's very mushy. It's just not pleasant to click. Just listen to this. Doesn't sound too bad. It feels mushy, but then you get a repro one, an original one in hand, and then much more solid, much more resounding click. In fact, I don't even know why people bother to make modifications to these to have guards around the button itself, because there's really, just at least from my experience, unless you're really bashing this thing around or getting gear rubbing up into it really hard and it's anchored onto something tight, there's no way you're going to be able to depress this and hot mic at least unless you're, got stuff up against it and you're really pressing as hard as you can. It's really hard to hot mic these from my experience. You really have to be pushing down on that button with intent in order to activate it. But that's just, again, I haven't really run this. That's just from my experience. It could differ. I'm sure there's a way that you can depress these. So I'm sure in some cases the button protectors are valid, but really out of the box, they seem really solid. So one thing you may notice is this shock cord here, which is one of the modifications that I recommend doing. I haven't fully tied this off yet or cut this down to size, simply because there's a lot of... I still have to make the amplification circuit to this PTT, which I've yet to do. I need to pick up a few more supplies before I do that. And there's a few ways to do this depending on what radio you have. I'm doing it for the Baofeng BF F8HP radio that I currently have, where it also works for the UV5R. You can see the crude pinout on screen, which is what I actually found in my my airsoft PTT. So I'm taking that pattern and working it with a real steel one. So obviously, what most people will do when they want to secure your PTT to your gear is they will go out and buy the Ferro Concepts PTT retainers, which are all well and good. And I actually tried making one of my own here. Let me dig that out as an example. So this is one that I actually tried making myself. It isn't great. I have a terrible sewing machine. I just kind of wanted to test it to prove to beginners that you can make something like the Ferro Concepts PTT, which is kind of really pointless. They're only like $3 or something, so it's not a big deal to really go out and just buy some. But I just wanted one right now just to kind of test the concept, see whether I liked it or not. And the idea is that you would weave the cord through one end, and it would loop around, and then you would insert this through someplace on your molly, and then the other end would obviously loop around and then attach here. And that may work for a lot of people, especially if you have a plate carrier that does not have molly that is vertical. But I'm currently running the LBX-0300, which is more of just a budget version of the LBT-6094 series, which I like very well. I might do a review on that vest sometime when I have my comm setup all rounded out, but neither here nor there. I just find that looping a piece of shock cord through the mounting clip holes is a lot better, because you could just loop this through the vertical molly and then it just secures on that way, and it holds it very flat, holds it very tight. I find that with the Ferro Concepts PTT retainers, it's very easy to just rotate them every which way, and it's not really pleasant in my opinion. But yeah, and if you're curious about the shock cord, this is, in case I hadn't already mentioned, this is 1/8 inch shock cord. I actually mistakenly bought a whole bunch of 3/16 inch shock cord, which did not fit through the holes, and it's a very snug fit. You're going to want to burn the ends, and you're going to want to sort of twist it and gently push it as close as possible, kind of inch it in there, but it'll be solid once it's in there, and I highly recommend doing this modification if you have a vest with vertical molly on the chest. The legit Nexus PTTs will typically come with this big chunky clothing clip, which isn't really meant to hook onto molly, it's just meant to clip onto your flight uniform or survival vest. So that's what these come with. I'd just toss these out. I don't even use this. I'll still keep it around. I don't mean literally throwing it out, and then the airsoft ones will have a more reasonable military style clip, which can fit into molly. But again, a lot of people don't like these. I don't like these either. They make the PTT stick out way too much, and they're just cumbersome. So that's really my take on it. There really isn't much more that I can say about these. I'll probably do a full video on the actual conversion of my PTT. There's a decent list of supplies you'll need, not too much, and it's pretty simple to do once you know what your pinout is and what radio you're converting for. And the reason why you need to do this is for whatever headset you're using. Like see here, I have the TCA replica ComTac 3s, which again, I'm probably going to end up getting real steel ComTacs anyways, but I just wanted these as a cheap placeholder while I'm building. And I'll buy once, cry once. I learned that lesson, but you know what? These are better than like Z-Tac or TacSky. Not going to get into that, but anything with a military dynamic microphone, and if you're using it with a civilian radio, it's going to be way too quiet on the transceiving end of it, and you're going to need to amplify your PTT so that other radios can hear you properly. And again, it'll still work without amplification, but you'll be quiet as all hell from what I understand. So keep that into consideration when you're building your own PTT. And obviously, if you're getting something like a TRI PRC 152 replica embedder or something of that nature, where it has it's just by its nature, it can be used with military hardware. You don't really need to do an amplification. And one system that I really like is something that JCI Comms came out with, where there is an inline adapter that you can plug into your Baofeng, and it has a 6-pin embedder connector on it. And that way, if you end up upgrading to embedder radio, you can just take off that adapter and your PTT is not amplified and it's ready to use with an embedder as is. So definitely check out JCI Comms or even Disco 32 if you're wanting to get a PTT of your very own and you don't want to go through with building one. The only reason I'm building one is mostly just due to expense. I'm a little bit of a cheapskate. I know, poor fag here, but the big thing also is that it's also kind of interesting. It just kind of proves that beginners can, modify their own PTTs. There's probably better ways to do it. Obviously, just spending a little extra dosh to get your own PTT that's already amplified professionally, but it's not a very difficult circuit. You can do it yourself if you really had your mindset to it, and I'll probably go over that process when I actually start the modification. So I'll update you guys with that when that happens. So that's pretty much all I have to say. If you have any comments, questions, corrections, or concerns, as always, drop them down in the comments below. I am Duke, and I will see you all later.